The neighborhood was quiet. Too quiet. Late afternoon sunlight stretched across the cul-de-sac, casting long shadows over pristine driveways and neatly trimmed lawns. It was the kind of place where trouble wasn't supposed to happen, where people left their doors unlocked during the day, where neighbors waved at each other while watering their flower beds, and that's exactly why they chose it. The two men moved with confidence, their polo shirts neatly tucked, clipboards in hand, fake. HOA badges glinting in the sun. To anyone else, they looked like just another pair of inspectors doing their rounds, checking on fence heights, lawn maintenance, whatever trivial violations these associations loved to nitpick. But I had been watching them. For weeks, reports had been popping up, missing valuables, confused homeowners, stories that didn't quite add up. Nobody could figure out how these so-called inspectors always seemed to target the most vulnerable, elderly couples, widows, people living alone. They came in for an inspection and left with pockets full of stolen jewelry, cash, and anything. Small enough to disappear without a trace. By the time their victims realized what had happened, the men were long gone. They knocked on the door of a small, one-story home near the end of the block. I recognized the place. Mr. and Mrs. Holloway lived there. An older couple, kind but forgetful. The kind of people who still trusted a firm handshake and a friendly smile. The man who answered the door was in his 70s, his frail hands gripping the edge of the frame as he squinted at the two strangers. He hesitated. Not enough. One of the men stepped forward, his smile easy, practiced. "Good afternoon, sir. Homeowners Association Inspection Unit. Just a routine check to make sure. Everything's up to code." A lie? There was no inspection, no real HOA involvement. Just two predators in cheap disguises, waiting for their moment to strike. Mr. Holloway glanced at their badges, then back up at them. "I don't remember hearing about an inspection," he said slowly. The second man chuckled, shaking his head. "We get that a lot. It was sent in last month's HOA newsletter. You know how those get buried under bills." His voice was smooth, reassuring. A tone designed to disarm, to lull people into a sense of security. "I suppose you need to come in then?" The first man nodded, already stepping forward before he even got an answer. "Just a quick check, sir. Won't take more than 5 minutes." And just like that, they were inside. I clenched my jaw. I could already picture how it would go. One of them would chat up Mr. Holloway, keep him distracted, point out fake violations that needed immediate attention. The other would slip away, moving quietly through the house, checking for open drawers, valuables left in the open. Maybe a jewelry box, maybe an envelope of emergency cash tucked inside a kitchen cabinet. By the time they left, Mr. Holloway would be none the wiser. Not this time. Because this time, they knocked on the wrong door, mine. I stepped off my porch, slow and deliberate. These guys were good, but they weren't me. And they had no idea what was coming. The problem with guys like this? They always get greedy. They should have stopped while they were ahead, moved on to another neighborhood, picked another set of victims too trusting to see through their scam. But they didn't. Instead, they made their biggest mistake yet. They knocked on my door. I watched from my living room window as they strolled up my driveway, still dressed in their cheap HOA disguises, still carrying those damn clipboards like they were about to write me up for having the wrong shade of mailbox. They had no idea. To them, I was just another homeowner, another easy target. They didn't know my name, didn't know I'd spent over a decade working federal cases, tracking criminals far more dangerous than these two low-level conmen. Didn't know I had a loaded Glock 19 sitting on the kitchen counter. And they sure as hell didn't know that by the time they left my house, their scam would be over for good. I took a slow breath, steadying myself. I could have ended it right then. Called it in. Had local PD swoop in before they even reached my porch. But no, that wasn't enough. These guys needed to feel it. The fear. The realization that this time, they chose the wrong house. So I waited. The doorbell rang. I let 3 seconds pass, then opened it just enough to see them standing there, those same practiced smiles plastered across their faces. "Afternoon, sir," one of them said. "We're with the Homeowners Association. Just a quick routine check to make sure everything's up to standard." His partner nodded, already scanning past me, eyes flicking over my hallway like he was mentally cataloging what might be worth stealing. "Sloppy? Routine check?" I asked, my tone neutral. The first guy nodded, completely unaware that I was watching his every move. "Yep. You should have received a notice last month. It's just a quick walkthrough." I leaned against the doorframe, tilting my head slightly. "That's funny," I said, "because I don't remember getting any notice." A flicker of hesitation, the kind that only someone trained to read people would have caught, but I saw it. The second guy jumped in, his voice smooth. "Ah, well, you know how these things go. Sometimes emails get lost, letters get misplaced." He chuckled, casual as ever. "We just want to make sure everything's up to HOA standards." I let the silence stretch. Let them sweat just a little. Then, without breaking eye contact, I slowly reached behind me, just far enough to grip the handle of my Glock. I didn't pull it out, didn't need to, because I saw it. The exact moment they realized they weren't in control anymore. The first guy's smile faltered just for a second. The second one shifted on his feet, his confidence cracking. "Tell you what," I said, my voice calm, steady. "How about you show me some ID?" Another beat of silence. Then the first guy cleared his throat, forcing his smile back into place. "Oh, we don't usually carry individual IDs. HOA sends us out as a team." Wrong answer. I let my own smile creep in, slow, deliberate, deadly. "That's so?" I said, finally letting my hand rest on the grip of my pistol. Their eyes flicked down, saw the movement, and that's when it hit them. They just knocked on the wrong damn door. The shift was almost imperceptible. Almost. 1 second they were all smiles, polite, professional, the perfect picture of so-called authority. The next, that polished act started to crack. The first guy squared his shoulders slightly, angling, himself just a little closer to the door, like he was testing whether he could push his way in. The second guy, the one who had been scanning the inside of my house like it was a damn catalog, suddenly wasn't smiling anymore. I'd seen this before. Predators testing their prey. "Sir," the first one said, his tone firmer now, like I was just another stubborn homeowner refusing to comply. "We're conducting an official HOA inspection. If you refuse to cooperate, we may have to issue a violation." I almost laughed. A violation? That's what they were going with? I let my hand rest a little more obviously on the grip of my pistol, still holstered at my side. "Yeah?" I said, keeping my tone casual. "Go ahead. Issue it." Another flicker of hesitation. They weren't expecting pushback. They were expecting fear. The second guy stepped in now, his voice dropping just slightly, like he was trying to establish dominance. "Look, sir. We don't want to make this difficult. We have the right to inspect any property under HOA jurisdiction." "Do you?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. He nodded too quickly. "That's how this works." I exhaled slowly, like I was considering it. "All right," I said. "Let me just call the HOA president real quick. Get some verification." Panic. It was subtle. Just the briefest shift in their expressions, a split-second look between them. "But I caught it." "You don't need to do that," the first guy said a little too quickly. "We're just here to do our job." No, I said, already reaching for my phone. "I insist." I had them now. The second guy took a half step back, his confidence starting to erode. The first guy's jaw tightened, his fingers flexing. Slightly, like he was weighing his options. They thought they could bluff their way through this. They were wrong. I lifted my phone, and that's when they snapped. The first guy shoved forward, his hand slamming against my door, trying to push his way inside. The second reached into his pocket, maybe for a weapon, maybe for something else. Didn't matter, because I was already moving. Before the first guy could step through the threshold, I had my Glock out, leveled right at his chest. The effect was instant. They froze. The second guy's hand stopped halfway to his pocket. The first guy's breath hitched, his muscles locking up like his brain was just now processing the reality of the situation. "Try that again," I said, my voice calm, daring them, Neither of them moved. Smart choice. Now, I continued, you two are going to take a big step back, turn around, and walk your asses off my property before this becomes something you can't walk away from. They hesitated, still processing, still looking for a way out. I clicked the safety off, and that made the decision for them. The first guy swallowed hard, lifting his hand slightly. All right, no need for that. Then leave. They backed away, step by step, until they hit the driveway, and that's when I saw it, the way their gazes shifted just for a second toward the street. They had a backup plan, a vehicle waiting nearby. This wasn't over. I saw the moment they made the decision. It was a flicker of hesitation, just a fraction of a second where instinct fought against stupidity. They should have walked away. They could have walked away, but they didn't. Instead, the second guy, the one who had been reaching into his pocket earlier, made his move. His hand shot inside his jacket, his body shifting slightly as if to turn and run. But I wasn't fooled. I knew exactly what he was doing, and I was already faster. Before he could even grip the weapon, I dropped my stance, squared my aim, and had my Glock locked onto him. "Don't!" The single word cut through the thick tension like a blade. He froze. His fingers twitched, but he didn't pull. Because he knew he'd never clear the holster before I put him down. His buddy, the first guy, wasn't as bold. He had his hands half raised, his eyes darting between me and his partner, like he was weighing whether this was worth dying for. It wasn't. Keeping my gun trained, I reached behind me and pulled the handcuffs from my belt. The distinct metallic clink as I unraveled them seemed to slap reality back into them. "This is how it's gonna go," I said, my voice even. "Hands where I can see them. Then you're both getting on the ground. If either of you twitches the wrong way, I pull. The trigger. Simple." No one moved. For a long, stretched-out second, the air itself felt like it held its breath. Then, the second guy's fingers uncurled from his pocket. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled his hand out. Empty. I didn't flinch, didn't blink, just waited. Then he raised his arms. "Surrender." His partner followed immediately, dropping to his knees, his face pale, sweat beading at his forehead. Now they understood. Now they knew that they had picked the wrong target. I moved forward, my stance. Steady, my finger still resting near the trigger. "Flat on your stomachs, hands behind your heads." They obeyed. I cuffed the first one, then the second, keeping my Glock trained on them as I pulled out my phone. Who are you?" The first guy stammered, his voice shaky. I let out a slow exhale. "The last homeowner you'll ever try this on." Then I dialed. It was time for these two to get exactly what they deserved. The wail of sirens cut through the air, bouncing off the quiet suburban streets. The two men lay flat on the pavement, hands cuffed behind their backs, their confidence long gone. Gone was the smooth charm, the fake authority. All that was left was fear. I stood over them, gun still in hand, my heartbeat steady. This was over. I heard the tires screech before I saw them. 2 squad cars pulling up fast, blue and red lights flashing in the fading daylight. Within seconds, officers poured. "Out, weapons drawn, hands where we can see them." One of them barked. "They're already cuffed," I called out, lifting my hands slightly so they knew I wasn't a threat. Weapons in their pockets, they tried to pull on me. The first officer, Sergeant Miller by the name tag, stepped forward cautiously, his eyes flicking between me and the 2 suspects. Then recognition hit him. "Carter?" he said, lowering his weapon slightly. "What the hell are you doing here?" I smirked. "Taking out the trash." Miller's eyes narrowed before turning to the men on the ground. And that's when it clicked. His posture stiffened. "Oh, you've gotta be kidding me." The other officers moved fast, patting them down, pulling the stolen wallets, jewelry, and cash from their pockets. "This them?" Miller asked, glancing at me. I nodded. "They've been working this neighborhood for weeks, maybe months." One of the officers flipped open a notebook, scanning through a list. "We've had at least 15 reports of missing valuables, all matching this exact scam. Fake HOA reps, forced inspections, intimidation tactics. He let out a low whistle. Damn, we've been looking for these guys. I let out a slow breath. I had suspected they were part of a bigger operation, but seeing the officer's reaction confirmed it. These weren't just two guys running a small-time scam. This was a network, a full-on organized crew that had been bleeding homeowners dry. One of the suspects, the guy who had reached for his weapon, finally snapped. "This is entrapment," he spat, twisting on the pavement. "You can't do this. We didn't do anything." "Illegal!" Miller crouched next to him, yanking him upright by the cuffs. "Oh yeah? I'm sure the judge will love hearing about that illegal weapon you were about to pull." The guy clamped his mouth shut, realizing he had just talked himself into a deeper hole. The second guy, the one who had tried to push into my house, wasn't even fighting anymore. He just stared at the ground, silent. He knew it was over. Miller turned to me, shaking his head. "You just saved us a hell of a lot of time, Carter." I slid my Glock back into my holster. Glad to help, but I wasn't doing this for them. I was doing this for the people who had been scammed. The families who had lost heirlooms, cash, a sense of security in their own damn homes, and now these guys were off the streets and their little operation, done. 6 months later. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back rows, their cameras and notepads ready to document every second. Some of the victims sat quietly in the audience, gripping their hands together, waiting for justice. And in the front, 2 men in orange jumpsuits. No more fake HOA badges, no more smooth-talking scams. Just 2 criminals, shackled and defeated, waiting to hear their fate. I sat in the second row, arms crossed, watching as the judge shuffled some papers before. Glancing over the rim of his glasses. "Defendants Jason Marks and Evan Grady," he began, his voice steady, firm. "You stand before this court convicted of felony fraud, criminal impersonation, forced entry, and attempted assault with a deadly weapon." The 2 men didn't even look up. The judge continued, flipping through a file. "Over the course of 4 months, you targeted at least 18 homes, stealing cash, valuables, and in some cases, irreplaceable family heirlooms. You took advantage of elderly homeowners, widows, and single parents. You used fear and intimidation to get what you wanted." Snapped the file shut. "And then, you made one very critical mistake." Silence, his gaze flicked toward me, just for a second, before returning to the defendants. "You knocked on the wrong door." Marks, the one who had tried to push into my house, finally looked up. His face was hollow now, sunken from months behind bars. He knew what was coming. "Given the premeditation of your crimes, the number of victims, and the violent nature of your final attempt, this court has no choice but to impose a severe sentence." He let the words hang for a moment. Then, 15 years in federal prison. The courtroom erupted. Some gasped, some nodded. A few victims even wiped away quiet tears, relieved that justice had finally been served. Grady, the one who had reached for his weapon, stiffened in his seat, his hands clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. Marks just slumped, his head hanging between his shoulders. They knew there was no appeal, no second chance. This was it. The judge banged his gavel. "Court adjourned," I exhaled, standing up as the officers moved in, shackling the 2 men once, more before escorting them away. 15 years. 15 years where they wouldn't be able to scam, steal, or terrorize another innocent homeowner. I walked toward the exit, hearing the low buzz of conversations around me. Some of the victims shook, my hand thanking me. Others just gave small nods of appreciation. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because no one else should have to deal with what they did. And now? Now they'd have plenty of time to think about the day they knocked on the wrong door. As the courtroom emptied, I lingered for a moment, watching as the 2 men were led through the side doors in cuffs. No more fake authority, no more scams, no more easy targets. Marks kept his head down, defeated. Grady, the bolder one, tried to hold on to whatever pride he had left, but I could see it, the stiff posture, the clenched jaw. He wasn't angry. He was scared. Good, because this time, they were the ones with no control. I stepped outside, the crisp air filling my lungs as I walked down the courthouse steps. Reporters were swarming near the exit, throwing questions at the DA and the lead. Investigators. I could have spoken to them, could have given some statement about justice or public safety, but I didn't need to. The case spoke for itself. These two had spent months preying on people who trusted them, people who never thought to question the friendly inspectors knocking on their door. They had gotten away with it. Until me. And now? Now they'd spend 15 years behind bars thinking about how badly they miscalculated. I glanced across the street and spotted some of the victims standing together. Mr. Holloway, the elderly man they had tried to rob before coming to my house, was among them. He caught my eye and gave me a slow nod. That meant more than anything, because this wasn't just about taking down two criminals. It was about the people they had hurt, the ones who finally got to see justice served. I turned away from the cameras, from the courthouse, from the past 6 months of hearings and trials. It was over. They were gone. And now I could finally move on. Justice wasn't just served, it was final.